So for many years I thought the wood had a massive impact on the way a guitar sounds, feels and is as its own little being. Over the years though, I've sort of started to find different ways of thinking about it, and this is my contribution to the Tonewood argument. It's an enduring belief around the amount of wood and the type of wood have a massive impact on the sound of an electric guitar and guitars in general. And the other side of the argument is around pickups. So the pickups being, the microphone for that guitar, the way it transduces sound, will also have a big difference. My hypothesis would be that every little thing on the guitar will make a difference. And having modified and upgraded a lot of guitars, I do know sort of how these variabilities happen. So things like bridge material make a difference to the way the guitar kind of pings on the top end. The string gauge, the string style, whether they're sort of what they're made of, your nut, your tuners, you could go to town on these things, but the pickups make a huge difference. And then you can look at the electrics. The electrics make a huge difference. So let's just go back to the wood side of things. What is it about wood and why do we use the woods that we've got? So historically, the woods used on guitars are carried from other traditions of other instrument manufacture, but also what was available at the time and what can you dry out. So from a functional perspective, you need dry season woods to actually use to build guitars, because if they have moisture in them, you start having problems once they've been built. So your frets start sprouting out. You can have necks warp, all kinds of things really. And parts of the tree where the necks come from, is it quarter sawn, is a thing that you'll see on a spec sheet. It just means what part of the tree and how has it been cut out will have an impact on how solid and rigid that guitar might be. So workability, availability, all these things contribute. How does it work in terms of the principles and the science of sound? Well, let's just start with acoustic guitars. So from an acoustic perspective, you see two kinds of acoustic guitar. You've got laminate guitars, which are made of very thin pieces stuck together, and you've got solid acoustic guitars. Now this one is a solid one. It's a Taylor 4 series, and here there's a 6mm thick end joint to the wood. You can see that the guitar here is literally 6mm thick on the wood on the sides, and then the top would be a solid piece. It's still braced, and every manufacturer does their own bracing, but the acoustic guitars is where you really see that difference in terms of wood. So you could compare a 3 series to a 4 series to a 5 series. The 5 series used to be made of maple, and 3 series is made of sapele. This is made of avant-garde, which is like an alternative kind of to rosewood, and then they do rosewood series as well as they go higher up the range. These guitars have a different set of complexities to their tone and feel. I'm going to demonstrate this with a little montage now. So from that, you can hear a big difference in the size of the instrument, but they are acoustic instruments, and you're hearing it through a microphone. This next piece is around the electrics. Electrics, there's so much more at play. Just starting with an electric, you've got every little component that's different. The wiring, the pickups. Every pickup is slightly different. I'm just going to show you what CERN say. So Rob Chapman recently released a video on Tonewood where he consulted with some scientists from CERN. Check this out.
Imperfect, complex physical systems. They dampen and amplify frequencies in all stages of the sound path. This starts immediately in the way that the string is itself picked. Pick hardness, picking technique affect massively the resulting sound spectrum generated by the guitar strings. The build parameters of the guitar, such as pickup, position, angle and height, and even the materials used to build the body of the guitar, are also going to affect which frequencies are benefited and which are taken away by the system. And this is absolutely key. Finally, the pickups that try to transform the mechanical vibrations into electrical signal and the electronics of the guitar are also imperfect and follow their own unique and non-linear frequency and phase response. It's the interplay of these factors that create the diverse tones that define electric guitars, each instrument bearing a unique sonic signature shaped by design, construction and player technique. So it looks like and sounds like when you hit the strings on electric guitar, the whole physics system is at play and certain frequencies are absorbed by the system. Now we know this because if that wasn't the case and you hit those strings, they would ring forever. People that believe in tone would say that a maple cap is bright sounding, for example. And really what Mr. X is suggesting, and I would agree with him from my experience, is that a maple cap is a very dense material. It's probably soaking up low end and the remaining high end is being spoken. It works in reverse. Everything in your guitar is soaking up frequencies and the remaining frequencies are coming out of your amplifier. Of course, whatever's remaining, if you use distortion, is distorted. I think the materials affect a lot more the feel of a guitar, but they definitely affect the way it sounds to a very small degree, especially with clean tones and very slightly with crunch tones. And I will tell you, I noticed this a lot more at volume.
And it's that idea of subtractiveness that you get with electric guitars. It's not what the maple top is adding to the sound, it's what it's taken away from an original sound. So next, what I've done is I've compared some an element of sound. So we'll take a scientific approach. The science is that your guitar will have or the guitar tone is broken down into two main components. One is the way that the guitar attack happens, the way the attack, the sustain, the decay and the release of the tone of each note is distributed. And I'll do a quick deep dive on that. The second is the actual tone that's produced and synthesized. So if you work in the realm of synthesizers, you'll know about some of this kind of stuff where you're adding partials to waves. So basically you've got a wave that your guitar makes, a fundamental kind of frequency that we identify. So it might be that I identify that as a D, you know, that note is a D, but within that D there are other harmonics, and the harmonics that are being produced will be compatible with that D, but there'll be slightly variations at different levels of volume or amplitude, and that's quite easy to measure through a spectrograph, and I'll show you some examples in a second. It should be up on the screen, but there, so those two combinations will make the tone. So let's have a quick look at the attack and sustain as recorded on some different guitars. Just the first bit here, I did some recordings on my guitars. So I used a range of different guitars. I used a P90 Les Paul Tribute model, which doesn't have any lacquer on it. It's more like a satin finish. I used a Les Paul with a PAF, Les Paul Standard. a hollow PRS, a classic Vibe Telly 60s version, and a USA Strat. So I went in and recorded some notes, and the first set of notes here was like just a G played with my finger, and then I played a bend with my finger here, and then I played like a power chord with a pick. I used a Dunlop pick. I'll show you the picks I used. They're like a Dunlop with a Jazz 3 element to them. And then I used, you'll see here, I did another string bend but using the pick. And then I did a power chord, like a G on the low E string, and then I did a nice open A sus chord. So let's just start with the first bit here of the analysis. What I'm looking for here is not necessarily the building blocks of the way the tone works. So that would involve an acousmograph, where I could look at essentially kind of the way the harmonic series is dealt with across that note. So you might have a fundamental sound, a frequency, and then within that there'll be partial frequencies at different levels of volume which create the building blocks of that tone. But one of the things that really are impacted by the guitar, and this kind of alludes to the variables in guitars as well, is the way notes are reproduced. So this was set based on my loudest guitar. Okay, so the loudest guitar is the Les Paul with PAFs, and I set that to between 6 and 3, -6 and -3, and then I went and did these samples here, tried to keep them consistent. So the first bit here is what we're looking at is the attack of a sound, the way it sustains, the way it decays at the end, and then the very end of that note is the release. Okay, so just looking at this first one here, the attack was quite low. It's quite high on the first one. This was the P90 Les Paul. Then it was slightly less. These were done with my fingers though, remember, and this is the problem with fingers, they have a lot of variability. Hollow body, the CV Telly, and then it's a USA Strat that I used with Texas Specials. Again, trying to do a single note, it was the same kind of response. When I started to use a pick, there's a lot more uniformity in the way the notes are attacked. So this is illustrated here because they're all kind of similar in shape. The sustain on them seems to be quite similar, but then the difference between the single note bend, this is the single note bend with a pick, and that's a single note bend with a finger, similar shape in all, but there's a lot more going on in the sustained decay area. So this is where we're starting to compare different guitars. So the P90 Les Paul seems to have a thicker, longer sustain than all the other guitars, bar probably the CV Telly. The Strat sustain drops off so fast, and then you're kind of in the release section very quickly, and that was the same for the hollow body. So the hollow body, it had its initial part of the sound, and then it started to decay real quick, where the other guitars lasted a bit longer. This is a power chord using the G on the lower E string, and we can see there that the sustain on the P90 just kept going. Now I'm wondering whether that's linked to having a different finish to the other guitars, where the wood sort of just rings out. It feels lively in the hands, that guitar does. And then the other one is the Les Paul. The second one down. Les Paul is a very loud, resonant Les Paul. The PRS hollow body has a very sort of all the way through quite a consistent kind of sound, but it kind of goes from left to right, kind of wobbles quite a lot on the sound. And then the Telly and the Strat have a similar kind of shape to them, but the Telly resonates a bit better. And I don't know whether that's because, and again, you can't, these are some of the variables between the guitars, which again supports a pickup or a Tonewood debate. It supports both of those things. I think that you've got, essentially, you've got different body shapes, but then different materials. So the Strat's made of poplar. It's a 1997 Strat, and it had a swimming pool body. So what that means is inside, behind the scratch plate, it looks like a swimming pool. It's just one big open space, and you can put any pickups you like in there. But the Telly, everything's just sculpted to fit the Telly pickups in. Now the Telly I've got the 60s one. I've put Seymour Duncans in there, so they're quite high output. They're the quarter-pound pickups, and the Strat has Texas Specials. So that again, they're high output, gritty kind of pickups. But when you look at it against, say, like a P90, the P90's got loads going on. Another thing to note that's really important: P90 pickups. Certainly on Les Pauls, are screwed directly into the body of the guitar, where PAFs on a lot of Les Pauls, like mine, they go into a pickup ring, which is then screwed into the body. Now, some people, I met a guy at the guitar show, he's got some beautiful custom guitars. I'll put a link up right now. He does a thing where he will convert your Les Paul, and you can have it so that it looks like it's screwed into the pickup rings, but actually your pickups get directly mounted into the body, and he swears that it makes a difference. And to be fair, I played one of his Les Pauls that is converted, and it did make a difference. So it's a thing that people do, people who know. Whether it makes a massive difference, I don't know. It might be a little bit of everything sort of thing. The next piece here, I did a big open A chord. Now, the reason why I did that is because nut materials will come into that. It's an open A2 chord or an A sus, where you play in sort of like just a big sort of, you've got two strings you're holding down, and all the others are just open. So your A is open, and your G, your B, and your little E are open. And again, this gives you a chance to do some talking. So a lot of people talk about nut materials.
Here's one nut material. Now, I'm not going to say whether these are PRS nuts or other companies' nuts or whatever, but you can hear, listen. Here's a piece of bone. And what you're hearing, you can hear in the guitar. And what's fascinating about the bone, it's got more ring than that. This has got more ring than both of them, but it's higher in pitch. They all have a difference. And we spend a lot of time here at PRS playing around with nut materials.
So nut material might make a difference. Looking at this, the open chord on the PRS was quite loud. It booked its trend from a data perspective. The Strat again sort of seemed to come to life a bit more with the nut that's on that guitar, and then there was a lot more sustain from the Gibsons And these notes really rang out as well. You can't see it here because I can't go into the Logic project at the same time as showing you this because of the way I'm recording the audio. It just ruins the playback engine. So anyway, these are all different components. So what conclusions can we draw from this piece? Well, nut material makes a difference. Sustain is affected. There is a difference in sustain between the different guitars. There are lots of variables. So whether you play with your fingers or whether you play with a pick, what kind of shape pick, size pick, all of that will make a difference. And the way certain notes sustain within the actual initial piece of the sound, that attack on the guitar is different depending on the materials. All these guitars have the same brand of strings and they have the same string gauge. All of the guitars just went direct in, so there was no amp or anything like that. But there's some variables for you to look at and consider. So from that we can find that there are slightly differences that come from a guitar through their subtractivity and their variables. The other side of the argument is tone is in the fingers, and for me that's absolutely 100% without doubt. However, it's a human thing. So because of that, it's really important to note by having different variables and different guitars, things feel different, and that changes the way humans respond to the instrument. And a good example might be a guitar like this. So this is a Les Paul. It's got a thin neck. It's a 60s neck. It's got some really good sustain. And it's on clean. So when you play a guitar clean, it responds differently to how it does when it's dirty. It's cool. But is it sort of inspiring clean? Yeah, it's a great guitar. It's very resonant. Right, this guitar's a Stratocaster, yeah? So it's got a telly neck and it's made of Wenjay. Some people hate this guitar, some people love it. I like it. So this has a totally different feel. Very spanky. Very different to the Les Paul, and it evokes a different way of playing. And I think that's probably the main thing about the Tonewood debate is, does it change the feel of the guitars? Well, yeah, so the weight of this guitar is different. It isn't as sustainy, so I play it like it's not going to sustain. I just seem to play it. I'll give it less time to sort of ring out. And there are times for that, and there are times for not doing that. And every guitar kind of brings a different thing to it through those features and functions, through the wood and the tone that you get from it. So maybe the Tonewood debate isn't necessarily about sort of what sounds better by what wood. The woods make a difference. I don't know if they make a massive difference, but for me, it becomes a lot of the physicality of the instrument. The wood is important in terms of how it feeds back to you as a player, and how, some guitars are more subtractive than others. Ideally, a guitar wouldn't be a subtractive thing, but they are. But this makes you work for it, this guitar. We'll get another guitar. I always seem to play this guitar a certain way. just does a different thing, and because it's hollow as well. It's not great for rocking out. I don't kind of rock out with it. It doesn't invite me to do that. And the more I play this, the more I get inspired in a certain direction with my playing. It's because it's so spanky, you know. You put it on the neck. Lovely. So every kind of guitar, there's room for them. It's probably unfounded, but part of the Tonewood debate might come into that kind of thing as well, like traditions and what's kind of expected. But this leads me to the future, really. So I think people think that it has a bigger impact than it actually does, because I've just played a load of guitars there that are different. They inspire me differently, but I'm playing them. To me, it feels very different. But if you're watching this, you think, well, he's just playing the same kind of nonsense, really. He's playing the same flannel, you know, he's playing the same sort of... That's kind of how I play, and that's it, really. So those kind of things, the guitar's helping me evoke that out emotionally, but it's kind of me playing it still. And the best compliment you can have as a guitar player is, you know, somebody might hear you from outside of a venue. Maybe you're playing a pub, maybe you're playing, you know, and somebody, or in a practice room, and one of your friends walks past and they can hear you. They know what you sound like. They come in and go, oh, I could hear you from outside. And they're not saying they could hear a guitar noise. You know, I can hear that Marshall stack and a Les Paul or whatever it is. I could hear you playing, and they just know what you sound like. And I think if I'm giving some real sort of advice to young people that are into playing, focusing on your own thing is always like, focusing on your own sound is always a great way to go. There's some great advice at the moment going around from some great players. Marcus King just did a Gibson video where he said something along those lines. You know, focus on your own playing and your own sound that you want to hear, and that's kind of like the way to getting happy with your playing. I'll never be happy with my playing because I'm always trying to learn a new thing or build something into my playing, but I am satisfied with the level that I can collaborate with others with, and that's kind of what that's where the Tonewood thing has got me to, is making sounds that blend really well with other people when collaborating. So the future of tone, I would imagine that we'll see synthetic instruments at some point, not made of, and I mean that made of, like, not made of wood. There's Emerald guitars are making like carbon fibre acoustics that sound amazing, feel amazing. And there'll be times where you might hear an Emerald guitar, you know, being on a track, and you won't be able to tell whether it's a synthetic guitar in terms of, you know, composite materials. There's been materials been used by companies like Martin and Gibson where they've had like fretboards that are made out of it's like a composite of like glued together fragments of wood. Doesn't sound great in the sense of that idea, but I've played one of those guitars and it puts me off to see it on a spec sheet, but when I play it, it just doesn't make a difference to me. It kind of sounds and feels right, so it's cool. Maybe there's problems when it comes to refretting, who knows. So to that end, I'm going to leave you with one thing. This is Nuno Betancourt. You should know about Nuno Betancourt. Great guitar player. On Rick Beato, talking about his experience with Van Halen. So he met Eddie Van Halen, got to play through Van Halen's rig. Imagine that, in front of Van Halen. And to his dismay, he sounded like Nuno Bettencourt sounded like Nuno Bettencourt.
You lose the attack, you lose where you don't realize that until you actually got to play Eddie's rig in front of Eddie like I did, and I thought I was finally going to sound like him. I think I told you the story, and I was so bummed out because I'm like, I have his strings. I even have his sweat on the strings. I have his DNA. I got his amp. I just watched him rehearse, and he's asking me to play his rig. I'm going to finally, after decades of A being VH1 and VH2 to my sound on Poor Graffiti, I'm finally going to sound like Edward. And I was so disappointed I sounded just like me. It was so horrible. It was like a horrible nightmare.
I wouldn't be very upset if I suddenly picked someone's guitar up and I sounded like Nuno Bettencourt, but I think the point is he sounds like he does, and I think that's the thing that we all have. So that's it. This video is brought to you by people who subscribe, and if you like the video, like it and share it and just tell your friends. Until next time, thanks for watching.